those who don't know, it's a tradition on my channel to make at least one list about the endings of games each year. This year, it's WTF Endings. Simply put, the endings you don't know what to make of. They can be good, bad, or anywhere in between. It also doesn't matter if it's the only ending or just one bizarre option out of many. If it leaves you asking yourself what the hell you just watched, it belongs here. Now for the rules. Partially due to this list's broad criteria, I'm not going to be including any endings I've already talked about. This is for two reasons. One, half of my bad endings lists will be on here if I didn't. And two, there are too many endings to choose from for me to lean on past videos. Then there's the usual rules, and that's it. Let's get started.
So your best friend's a vegetable now, blah blah blah. But you know what they say, when life gives you potatoes, you make potato salad. And I got just the recipe. Hit it! Buckle your pants, buckle your pants.
When people talk about Undertale and endings, they usually either talk about the satisfying joy of the true pacifist ending, or the crippling despair of the genocide ending. Lost in the fold between those two, though, is the insane amount of neutral endings. Sure, you don't get to see anything, as they're just a phone call from Sans, but they offer a lot of variety based on who you did or didn't kill. Some are pretty similar to the pacifist ending, some are closer to the genocide route, and others are just plain weird. Part of me wanted to put the ending where Miskatonic enslaves everyone and forces them to watch his show at this spot, but I knew this one had to go to the dog ending. This ending is what happens if you kill every boss but no one else. With every qualified leader dead, a small white dog takes control of the underground. It sleeps on the throne and does nothing, yet this is the best life for everyone. What makes this ending even stranger is the fact that it's clearly referencing Annoying Dog, who's a stand-in for Toby Fox. So what does that mean? Is Toby trying to retake control of his game after you murdered anyone else who could? Well, that doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't happen if you've killed anyone besides the bosses. Regardless of the answer to that, it certainly is a weird outcome.
Pull up your socks and dance! Buckle your pants! Buckle your pants!
Trover Saves the Universe is just about everything you would expect from a game by Justin Roiland. It's random, hilarious, filled to the brim with improv, and of course, very weird. However, even with all the insanity the game threw at me, the ending still caught me off guard. Basically, you confront Glorkon, and at first, things are pretty normal. That is, until the end of the fight, where he straight up kills Trover. In order to finish off Glorkon, you have to use Trover's dead corpse to get the crystal babies into Glorkon's eye holes, and link him up with the other abstainers. Now, that last sentence may have sounded insane, but it's really par for the course with this game. What isn't par for the course, though, is the ending. What happens when the abstainers are all linked together? Simple. Everyone in the universe dies. Keep in mind, this is the thing you were trying to do to save the universe. Surprisingly enough, though, this is a happy ending. For the game's credit sequence, you traverse the afterlife and meet with every character you've encountered, and all of them are happy. Even the characters who were mad at Trover have forgiven him. I guess despite the fact that everyone died, this game still had a more satisfying ending than Rick and Morty Season 3.
Buckle your pants, buckle your pants. Hey, I said dance. Buckle your pants.
Now for the ending that inspired this list. My Friend Pedro. The main premise of My Friend Pedro is that you're killing all these people because a banana is telling you to. Now, surprisingly enough, the questions of who this banana is and why you're listening to him aren't actually raised until the end. After you beat Ophelia, Pedro confesses what's actually been going on. As it turns out, all the bosses you were taking down were members of your own family. Your character was morally torn by the illegal actions his family committed, so he had Pedro wipe his memory so he wouldn't have any hang-ups about killing them. However, there's one more part of the deal. Once Ophelia was defeated, Pedro was meant to kill you so you wouldn't have to live with the guilt. So yeah, you get to fight Pedro as the final boss. And yeah, it's about as crazy as you would expect. Finally, when Pedro's been defeated, the player character takes off his mask to reveal Pedro's face? Yeah, I don't get it either. At this point, I'm like 80% sure this game's story is meant to be a parody of Hotline Miami. Not something unexpected coming from Devolver Digital. Oh yeah, and the question as to why there's a talking banana telling you what to do? That's never answered. Honestly though, expecting that to be answered is crazier than anything in this ending.
Ladies, buckle your pants. Gentlemen, buckle your pants.
As I've said before, the story of the Hex is like a darker version of Wreck-It Ralph. It goes to the logical conclusion of how video game characters would feel about the industry if they were sentient. Despite how different each of the games in the Hex feel from each other, there is one key thing they have in common. They were all made by the same developer, Lionel Snill. And let's just say his characters aren't too pleased with how he's treated them. Going back to the game's title for a sec, what exactly is the Hex? Is it just meant to represent the fact that you play as 6 characters? Nope. As it turns out, it's an artifact that everyone in the 6 Pint Inn has gathered to activate. However, it's missing one piece, the input of a player. Once you join them, a portal opens up to the real world, and the innkeeper reaches his arm through and kills Lionel Snill. I love this ending for so many reasons. It's funny, satisfying, unexpected, and makes perfect sense given everything that's happened. It also left me with a question that I couldn't stop pondering after watching it. Did Snill deserve this? At first, the answer may seem obvious. No. Sure, Snill put his characters through absolute hell, but it's not like he knew they were sentient. Even when he deleted Root Beer Reggie's game, he felt a good deal of remorse about it. However, as the walking simulator of Snill's life unfolded, it became clear that he had become beyond arrogant and toxic. Like one of those indie devs on Steam that goes after people for posting negative reviews. Now, someone being an arrogant jackass doesn't justify murdering them in real life. But this is a video game, and you better believe it's satisfying to see Lionel get taken down a peg.
Boys and girls of all ages, buckle your pants or they might fall down.
Guilty Party is an underrated classic on the Wii. It's basically Clue, but in video game form. The story revolves around the Dickens Family Detective Agency and their fight against the infamous criminal, Mr. Valentine. Aside from the fun of solving mysteries, the game's greatest strength is its humor, and that strength more than manifests in the reveal of Valentine's true identity. It's both insane and hilarious at the same time. As it turns out, Mr. Valentine is none other than Olivia Dickens, the Commodore's wife. Now, why did she do it?
Because you all ran off and became detectives, chasing around after your father, grandfather, brother-in-law. It wasn't bad enough losing a husband to his job. I had to lose my whole family.
Now, of course, there's the pretty obvious question that comes along with this twist. Why didn't she become a detective as well? It seems both more logical and a lot easier than becoming a criminal mastermind. Plus, she straight up committed murder! She killed at least one person over the course of the game, and that's not even counting the other countless bodies likely left in her wake over the course of her career. I think the game realizes how ridiculous this ending is, though, because immediately after the reveal, Olivia and the Commodore get into a lover's quarrel.
Do you have any idea the lengths I go to for you? Why, if you weren't out trying to be the world's greatest criminal all the time,
Nonsense! I had a whole blimp constructed for the occasion. I kidnapped a famous singing manatee. I had bullet train tickets, opera tickets, cruise tickets. It was going to be the best second honeymoon ever. And do you care?
I didn't have to kidnap anybody. I sought out 2 of them with my detecting skills that have put a roof over your head these last 42 years.
43 years. No, you don't care. All you care about is pudding. Do you know how much we spend on pudding every year?
And then there's a big dance party. This ending is a bit of a tricky one for me, because I'm not sure if the audience is meant to sympathize with Olivia or laugh at how ridiculous the twist is. Either way, the ending is certainly crazy enough to make this list.
Hey you, buckle your pants. Yes you, buckle your pants. Everybody, buckle your pants.
The kindergarten games are filled to the brim with insanity, but most of the time, it doesn't leak into the endings. The conclusions to the missions, while still crazy, make perfect sense in the insane world of kindergarten. That is with two notable exceptions. Both games give you a hilariously morbid ending when you collect all of the Monstermon cards. In the first game, when you collect them all and take them to the Nugget Cave, the apocalypse happens. The sky turns red and bolts of lightning strike down just about every character in the game, one by one, causing them to blow up. The only known survivors are you and Nugget. And after all that, Nugget starts plugging the sequel. However, I'm not here to talk about that ending because Kindergarten 2 more than one-upped it. For starters, instead of activating the talismans in the Nugget Cave, which is a weird place to begin with so it kinda makes sense, here, it happens in your own house. When you get all of the Monstermon cards, you press a button on the wall that moves your shelf, revealing a hidden room with Nugget dressed in cult robes. After harnessing the power of the cards, Nugget takes you to school and snaps his fingers, Thanosing half of the characters to death. However, when it's finished, Nugget gets pissed that only half of them died, so he snaps his fingers again and we get a return of the lightning that makes people explode, killing off the remaining characters. Also, this time, it really is everyone. In the last game, it was only the people in the schoolyard, so you could argue that the lunch lady and hall monitor were okay. This time, every person you encountered gets wiped out. Again, aside from you and Nugget. Even Lily and Billy, who Nugget was friends with, end up dying. So yeah, this ending takes an insane outcome caused by an unpredictable character and somehow made it even more insane and unpredictable. No sequel foreshadowing this time though, so who knows if we'll see a third version.
Buckle your pants, buckle your pants, buckle your pants, or your pants will fall to the ground.
With little misfortune on the way, I think it's a good time to look back on Franbo. It was a good game with an interesting story and beautiful yet horrifying artwork. And then there's the ending. What the heck was up with that ending? It's not bad, mind you, but Franbo was a confusing game at the best of times, and so much happened at the end, it's tough to know what to make of it. Let's back up a bit though. Chapter 5 takes place in the House of Madness. Just from that name, I'll let you guess how much sense this place makes. It doesn't get really crazy though, until the end. Starting with the reveal of how Fran's parents died. Remmer was the true culprit, but he possessed Fran and made her do it. Now, all of that sounds crazy, but it was actually pretty well built up throughout the game. The crazy stuff comes next. Fran finds Dr. Dearn strapped to a chair, and when she wakes him up, Aunt Grace and Dr. Oswald appear. Oswald tells Fran that she was part of one of his experiments, I think. And then Grace throws Mr. Midnight off a cliff. Understandably enraged by this, Fran starts strangling her, but Oswald shoots Fran. Right as Oswald is about to use Fran for his experiments, Itward and Palantris come in to save her. What happens afterward is kept pretty vague, but it's made clear that Fran is better off. So that's nice. Now, what I just described may have sounded incredibly hard to follow, but that's because it is. This is a game that isn't even clear on whether the worlds Fran visits are real or just in her imagination. So, at the end, where people would be expecting answers, the game just raises even more questions. And I'm torn on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Part of me does want answers, but another part of me really likes the ambiguity present, as it leaves some things really open to interpretation. Although, perhaps this is a bit too open for some.
Buckle your pants, just buckle them, babies, nice and tight, please.
Out of every game on this list, the Miskatonic is the one you're least likely to have heard of. It's a relatively short visual novel based on Lovecraftian horror. Despite that though, it's actually a comedy, which is pretty fitting because this game's ending feels like a joke. It barely feels like an ending, it feels like things just stop. Here's what happens. After spending most of the game trying to unravel a conspiracy at the Miskatonic University, Charlotte gets cornered and the staff gain control of her magic eyes. It's a pretty creepy sequence after she gets abducted, and when she wakes up, she's greeted by this thing that's going to be a pain to censor. You see, Charlotte's magic eyes merged just about every member of the Miskatonic together into this eldritch horror. Despite how terrifying it looks though, everyone involved loves it. Being merged together is pure bliss for them. So much so that they want to absorb everyone in the world and they need Charlotte's help to do it. Charlotte tries to talk them out of it and they agree. Not out of respect for free will, mind you, but out of fear that some unpleasant people may end up in their blob of happiness. Although they are convinced people will come flocking to them once the word gets out. Then, Charlotte goes upstairs, puts Mindy in charge of the school, and runs off with Nutty Annie to start a new life together. They just leave one of the most prestigious occult schools empty with a giant blob of people in the basement. The way I described this ending at the beginning may have made me sound angry about it, but I'm not. The way everything just ends so abruptly and how they don't even really bother to resolve much is nothing short of hilarious to me. Almost like an episode of Mike Tyson Mysteries.
Buckle your pants, buckle your pants, buckle your pants.
If there's one game I wish I could have put on the bad endings list, it would be Beholder 2. Simply put, there are so many ways things can go wrong. There's a total of 9 endings in the game, and only one of them is a happy outcome. But before I get into which one I chose, a bit of background. After a series of fascinating plot twists that I dare not spoil even though this list is about endings, Evan is confronted with the elusive Project Heimdall. It's a project his dad worked on before his untimely death. And it's been built up throughout the whole game. Basically, it's a machine that controls the minds of the public and has a bunch of preset commands. Which ones you have available depends on how many biometric safes you collected throughout the game. As you would imagine, each command leads to a different ending, and just about every ending is pretty unique and out there. Even the good ending is fascinatingly paradoxical. The one I've chosen for this list, though, is the seemingly innocuous Happiness for All free of charge. This command encourages everyone to strive for a common good. Now that sounds wonderful, right? Well...
As it turns out, everyone has their own idea of good, and this meant that people strived for different, often opposite things. A wave of unmotivated violence swept through the city. People attacked one another at random, sincerely believing that they were doing it for the common good. When the wave of violence subsided, leaving behind it blood-soaked streets, the few survivors, shaken to the depth of their souls by the incident, started building a better world. And they did it with such fervor that they forgot about their own basic needs. After only a month, Elmer was a ghost town where even the most desperate did not set foot.
Not only that, but Evan is racked by guilt for all the pain he's caused. Is this the worst possible timeline? No, but with those timelines, you could kinda see it coming. With this though, it seems like it would be such a positive outcome. It is kind of funny in a twisted way, how something that sounds so wonderful goes so horribly wrong. This is a story about a game called the Stanley Parable, and a joke that has seriously run its course. The Stanley Parable is a game about a man named Stanley, and a narrator who tries to guide him through the story. As a result of this, YouTubers often imitate the narrator when talking about this game. It's a clever joke for sure, but it becomes bland and predictable when everyone does it. Even Defoffalizer wasn't exempt from this, but in order to avoid being called a hypocrite, he will stop doing this joke right now. The Stanley Parable is number 1. Why? Simple. Just about every ending this game has to offer is insane in one way or another. Let's run through some of the highlights, shall we? There's an ending where another narrator takes control and Stanley visits a museum of all the game's assets and design philosophies. There's one where Stanley goes insane after realizing he's not a real person. There's multiple endings where Stanley kills himself for no reason. There's one where things get so off track that even the narrator has no clue what's going on. An ending where the narrator sent Stanley to different games because he made it clear he didn't like this one. And most notably of all, an ending where you make a choice the narrator didn't even consider possible, signaling to him that you are not Stanley, but rather a real person. Really? The Stanley Parable had to be number one. This list is about insane endings, and the Stanley Parable is basically just a bunch of different endings trying to be as insane as possible. I am Defoffilizer, and I have another video to shout out. I was on another podcast. It's the same one as last time, but this time we're talking about Stadia. Spoiler alert, we weren't too kind to it. Be sure to check it out if you're interested.